having issues logging in. Got it. They can at least catch us on our YouTube channel. Okay. And now this meeting is live streaming. Yep, sweetheart, don't know how to make you co-host this time. So sorry. Does not give me this option. So, all right. Let's go ahead and jump in here and get started. So I have got to having issues logging in. Got it. Why is that making? They can at least catch us on our YouTube channel. So sorry. Again, oh my goodness. Could I have any more? And now this live share. Okay, there we go. We will get this figured out. This is the one I want. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to start by bringing you guys into my computer space. I'm going to screen share, go right into here. Come on. Do your thing. Okay. So welcome. I am Pepper Joy. I'm a trauma alchemist. I am also a certified trauma recovery coach. And this is my business. My husband and I run the Inside Out Experience. So besides being your host tonight, as I've already mentioned, trauma alchemist, I'm a certified trauma recovery coach and supervisor, as well as an instructor for the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaches. I'm also an author, and I'll introduce you to my book later. And I'm a survivor of all manner of childhood abuse and trafficking. So I kind of know what I'm talking about when I share what I share with you tonight. So I want to start with alchemy and what its definition is so that you can kind of get a feel for what I do. All right. So the definition of trauma alchemy is a seemingly, keyword, magical process of transformation, creation, or combination. And if there's any questions about the material tonight, by the way, feel free to reach out to Coach PJ, Reverend PJ. And if it's a technical related, reach out to JB. Okay. So tonight, what you're going to learn about alchemy is how to identify when you're in a headspace of survival trauma and negativity, because these are the things that we're going to use in the alchemizing process. You're going to learn how to connect with what's keeping you from success in order to alchemize it. And you're also going to learn how to alchemize all of these things through mind, body, and soul work. So I have a lot of things I want to share with you tonight that might blow your mind and what you recognize to be good emotion, negative emotion, trauma, and whatnot. So this is rest. This is my trauma healing theory. It's called the restorative response system theory. And you can see rhythm, rise, resolve, reframe. And you're probably like, what does that even mean? I will introduce you to that in a moment. But first, I want to really talk to you about what is trauma, because this is the thing, one of the things we're using in alchemy. So what is trauma? And trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event, like an accident or a trigger warning, rape, or natural disaster. Trauma is also held in the body. It is somatic. It is inflammation or activation of your autonomic nervous system in service of survival. Trauma is also generational, it's communal, it's individual, it's internal, and most of all, it's also treatable. Trauma is the complete brains to bone disruption. And I used to use the word brokenness here, but there's not a real brokenness if you have trauma. There's just a real humanity about you. And so trauma is rather the disruption of your brain. It's a complete disruption from your brain and to your bones. And it calls us to reach to our souls, our inner selves, our higher selves, God, if you prefer, to heal. Okay, or alchemize. So let's talk about some types of trauma and their scope of experience. So you have acute trauma, and this one has not aged well with a single shooter situation. We have the chronic trauma, which is going to be something more like that autoimmune disorder. Sometimes it's going to be more that generational chronic. And then complex. War is a very complex trauma. Acute meaning one time. You fell and scraped your knee, you had a moment like someone said something nasty to you and it was like you've never even heard this word before, that you were just called. That's an acute one-off trauma. On a chronic level, it's going to be that back pain. It's going to be that day-to-day Suffering depression can be traumatizing. Suffering anxiety can be traumatizing. And then, of course, you imagine that you're suffering depression and you're walking through the house and you catch your toe on the furniture, and now you've got an acute trauma and a chronic trauma, and it starts to become a complex trauma because you start playing the shame game and blaming yourself for why that happened. So trauma can be experienced precognition. Before you had a clue about a clue, you can have experienced trauma. I am a person who I know in the womb I experienced trauma. Preconception, before you're able to conceive an idea or a thought. So before you have a clue about a clue, meaning you're not even aware you exist, and then suddenly you're like, I exist, okay, and there's a world outside of my existence. Preconception. Trauma can be had through all these times, and pre-verbal. So you can't even talk about what you've perceived and all that. So before that even happens, you can experience trauma. Now I'm just going to switch gears here a little bit, and I want to introduce you to the chakras. You may know what they are. You may not know what they are. You don't have to be a believer in any type of religion to know that energy that is stored in the body is usually stored in these exact pockets, okay? And with this crown chakra, I'm going to show you something interesting, because here in the picture, you see it resides above the head. Okay, this is your third eye, but actually, and then back here is where that crown chakra actually resides. And I'll show you why and what's actually there later. But let's talk a little bit about the brain too. So we have a little bit of the woo-woo, the religion going on over there, and you can feel however you want to about that. But I also feel it's very important to acknowledge and stay open-minded to what's out there and what's practiced, as well as what science is saying about it. So let's talk a little bit about what the science is saying about it. See this temporal lobe right here? This is that crown chakra. So your third eye chakra is that frontal lobe. This is where consciousness resides, and it's the location of that third eye chakra. This is your temporal lobe, and it's also where your thalamus and amygdala live, and they reside like in the very center of your brain. It's what connects the hemispheres of your brain together, and it is the actual location of the crown chakra. And I will tell you more about why this really excites me in just a little bit, so stick around. All right, it does not reside on top of one's head like you used to think, like that image that I just showed you. No, it's inside, it's within, and we'll get to why in a minute. Okay. So I want you to get comfortable in your soul, in your mind, and in your body. We're going to do a little breathing here. I'm going to ask Rev PJ to come on in a minute if he feels up to it, and show us a little bit of exercise to help us get present. Because where we're going to go tonight, it is soul deep. And I really want us to be present in our minds and our bodies and our souls. So I'm going to start with this, and then if Rev PJ, if you have something you want to add to that, to help us really take it deeper, I would appreciate it. But let's start with just checking in with your sensory and your experiential system. And there's a difference, okay? Your senses, see, taste, smell, hear, but then there's also this emotional state. And when I ask you what you're feeling versus what the emotion is, sometimes we don't know the difference. So I just want to put that out there. It's okay if you don't. But I hope tonight that you will be able to form an awareness around that. And I want you to check in with your body, and does it feel any pain or pressure? What are you seeing right now? What are you hearing? Do you have any kind of taste in your mouth? What do you smell? What's your emotional state? Is there pain any point in your body, any tension anywhere in your body? Is there a circulation struggle anywhere in your body? Is there this felt sense of safety for you in this time, in this place? Or is there this urgency and this activation of your feelings in your nervous system? And when I say feelings, I also want you to think about feelings versus emotion. And feeling isn't just this physical thing. Sometimes I can feel like someone doesn't like me, and my emotion about it is confusion and sadness, just to kind of give you an idea of the difference. How are you feeling? Can you do an exercise for us real quick?
End with one.
Okay, we're going to end with one, he said. All right. I like to have Rev PJ come in here and do somatic work with us because it's just such a powerful thing to get in our bodies and really check in. All right, so Dr. Bowen's family system theory. Why do we need to know this? Why is it important to how we're going to alchemize trauma? Because it's a part of understanding trauma. So he talks about how the individual is the sun. You may have also heard of the egocentric universe, and I believe it was Aristotle who had that. He wasn't completely wrong in that we are the center of the universe. We're taught that the sun is the center of the universe, and in our universe, we are the sun. Okay, and knowing that we are the sun, it means that the sun is, remember, a star, and it has a magnetic field around it, and it can attract and deflect. And that's important to know because that means you have power as the star of your universe to attract and deflect. Dr. Bowen believed that for every individual, we're surrounded by a nuclear family. So this would be mom and dad and siblings. Then they were surrounded by their extended family, which would be aunts, uncles, and grandparents and cousins, social influence, which would be your friends, your peers. And then there's cultural influence. And this can sometimes bleed into church worship spaces. And whatever, or sometimes it's the barbershop, sometimes it's the particular places that you commune with other people. That's going to lean into that multicultural and social level of influence. All of these things influence how you see the world. And that means that the way you see the world as an individual, as a star out here, your perception and orientation to what is danger and trauma is different from every other person on the planet. Out of 8 billion people, you have a different perspective from all of them, and you. And what we do throughout our lives, now that we understand our external family system, is we internalize that family system. And so when you look at your nuclear internalized family system, I want you to think about 2 things. One being, what kind of hats do you wear every day? And 2, how are those hats influenced by the voices in your head that you listen to? Are some of those hats influenced by the voice of your mother encouraging you or putting you down? Are they the voice of your father encouraging you or putting you down? Maybe it's someone from school back when you were little and it's been decades since then, and then suddenly you feel a voice inside you. You can still hear them to this day. And all of that is part of your internalized family system. And this is where we start venturing into what we call parts work. Okay. But before we go there, Dr. Bowen's nuclear family system model, this is the bullseye ring of how it looks in your textbooks. Individual, nuclear, extended family, social friends, multicultural, ethnic, and it goes on and on and on and on. Okay. And this is kind of what it likes. So just remember this. You are the sun. You are the sun. Okay, now remember earlier when I got really excited about that chakra that sits in not on your head, but more internal in the head? That's because this is where it sits. And why is that important? I will let you have a moment to think about that. It doesn't show it in this photo actually, but even inside of this is this thing called an amygdala. And it's this nut shape, this almond shape of your brain. And this shape of your brain is where your consciousness connects with this frontal lobe. And why is that exciting? Because that is literally the home of where you're going to alchemize everything. And I'll show you why later. Okay, let's talk about trauma responses. Most people know fight and flight. Everyone knows put your hands up and pick your feet up. Not everyone knows about freeze, and even less know about fawning. So I want to go over what these are. There is also, by the way, in the freeze is 2 kinds of freeze. So there's fight, flight, freeze, there's the hyperfreeze and the hypofreeze. Hyperfreeze is more of that deer in the headlights, that, oh my gosh, what's coming down the pike? Oh my goodness. And you're just like frozen in this fear and big doe eyes, okay? Then there's the hypofreeze, which is the possum playing dead. If I just lay here, the danger will pass over me. It will go away, okay? Fawning looks like people pleasing. It looks like a peacekeeper. It looks very appeasement heavy. It looks like mimicking or mirroring the behaviors of others in an effort to survive conflict. Okay. And this is important because fawning is one of the trauma responses that carries the most shame. And we're going to talk about shame and how to alchemize it as well. But when fawning and shame come together, the energy ball that they create is so intense, but people get so chronic with it, they forget they're living in it. And that's very, it's important to understand why, and I'll get to that. So, talking about shame, how to know when shame is present. The first way to know that shame is present is when denial is happening. It didn't happen that way. I don't remember it. All of that denial, shame is present. Attacking the self. I'm so dumb. I shouldn't have done that thing. Well, this is what I do. I'm a broken person. Anytime you're attacking yourself, shame is present. When we're attacking others, I wouldn't have done this if you hadn't done that. I wouldn't have lost my cool if you hadn't entered this kind of way. I wouldn't have felt this. What you're saying is you triggered me, which means my trauma is out of control. And I can't be safe to have engagement with other people. So anytime attack others happening, shame is present. And probably it's present because you have trauma triggers coming up for you. Withdrawal is the other one that you know shame is present. So not the same thing as someone who is trying to protect themselves. It is kind of doing that, but the thing about withdrawal is when it's prolonged. So to leave the situation initially, that's not a negative shame. That's an I need to get out of here before I do something shameful or say something shameful. But when it's a prolonged withdrawal, like I'm freezing you out, I'm fighting you out, I am fawning you out. Anytime it's like that type of withdrawal, that is going to be a dead ringer for shame being present. So how do you respond when shame is present? So when you see denial, it's so important that you recognize it, whether the denial is coming from you or the other person. So if you see someone and they're talking in denial, just recognize that's what's going on. There is no reason that you have to, even though we might be conditioned to, allow our shame to be, to commingle with other people's shame. And what I mean is, like, they're in denial because they're feeling shame. I don't have to fight them harder or shame them because shame's already present. I can keep mine and go home. I know what's going on for them. Oh, they're in shame. Gotcha. I'm out. You can reframe it. So if you're attacking yourself, this is what I do. I'm so dumb. I shouldn't have done that. You did it for a reason, and it's not because you're dumb, usually. And if you were dumb, it's important to ask yourself, why would I be considered dumb? Am I not, did I take on something that I'm incapable of? Was I just incapable of it at this time because my capacity is more limited? I did this, or is it really not dumb and I'm just saying that? Sometimes you can just be telling yourself a lie because you've been conditioned to a lie. And it's important to reframe that. That's actually a lie. I'm not dumb. I'm actually quite capable. When you see someone attacking others, it's all about responsibility. That is your shame. That is your shame. This is my shame. And let's all go home. Sometimes it's tempting. It's actually very tempting, not sometimes, but like all the time, it can be very tempting to want to be like, oh, let's all get in this little shame storm together. And you're a terrible person for this reason. I do this terrible thing. You do a terrible thing. And we just start shaming our shame and then shaming each other's shame, which, by the way, can create a great atmosphere for trauma. And then when it comes to withdraw, it's important to recognize when there's reconnection happening. So if someone withdraws, let them withdraw, see if they'll reconnect, but also give them the chance to reconnect. Or maybe you're the one that needs to withdraw, so that when you make an attempt to reconnect, depending on how receptive or not the group is, you'll know where the shame is, and you'll know it's not yours. I want to talk to you about the brain-heart connection, because the brain and the heart work together to create the atmosphere for alchemizing. And here's how. Your brain has electrical impulses, so there's electricity in your body. Your heart has a magnetic field, at least 6 feet out. There's a lot of debate about whether it's actually only 4 feet or 120 feet, but at least 6 feet out, most scientists agree that you have a magnetic field from your heart. The way it pumps, that vibration, the wave at the bottom of the screen flows, that's an indicator of the wave you're putting out. What is the energy you're putting out? So you have this electrical impulse, and this is energy that's coming from your brain and into your body. And then your heart's going to pick up on that, and it's going to speed up or slow down in accordance to the energy that you are feeling in your brain. Okay. And that's going to be how you are in the world. That's going to be who you are in the world amongst your nuclear family system, whatever one you've internalized and whatever one you're projecting at this point and you're seeing in the world around you. It's coming from what's going on with what you've alchemized in your brain and filtered out through your heart through that magnetic wave. So here is that example of the electrical impulses in the brain. Every thought you have, every memory you keep, every experience you get, and you have feedback and input from your nervous system, it's all computing lightning fast, like electricity throughout your brain. Okay. And then that's what's going to feed your heartbeat. It's going to drop down through your circulatory system, through your nervous system. It's going to speak to your heart. And that's your message to the world. Am I in survival? Am I thriving? Am I safe? Am I dangerous? Your heart is going to tell that, and you're going to feel it. If you're an empath at all, you've already felt that from other people, what they're giving off. So now let's talk about the nervous system, because I want to show you where your soul nerve is, which is the birthplace of your consciousness, and that little almond-shaped part of your brain. And the cute thing about this is nature signals to us that this is where consciousness starts, because this almond shape that you have in your brain, that almonds are the first bloom every spring. So the first thing to bloom every spring is this little almond, this almond flower. And then you think about in your brain, your consciousness is birthed there. And whatever happens from there is going through your nervous system and through your body and through your heart. And it's putting a message out to the world. What are you open to? What are you closed to? What are you bringing in? And what are you deflecting? And it happens through your nervous system. And these are the 4 parts of your nervous system. So this sympathetic nervous system, that's going to be more where your anxiety and that hyperfreeze reside. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But then you have your ventral vagal nervous system, and it kind of runs right in this part of the spine. The parasympathetic nervous system. So when you think about like bloating, you think about gas, you think about digestion, that's going to be more in that parasympathetic. And then the dorsal. And dorsal is, you can think of it dorsal as like they call it the dorsal stripe down the donkey's back. And when you think of the character Eeyore, who is a donkey, he's always so sad, so depressed, and he has his dorsal stripe because he's in a dorsal vagal space. He's in the low space of his nervous system. So that's a cute way to remember that. The autonomic nervous system, oh, this is just what it looks like against the spine. Wake up, there we go. Now I want to show you the window of capacity, and I'm going to tie in everything that I introduced to you tonight. I'm going to tie it all in a pretty little bow at the end, but I'm taking you on a journey with a lot of facts and things that I'm throwing at you. Some of this you will know, some of this you will have no idea about, and it's okay. Okay, so window of capacity, you probably heard it called the window of tolerance. I'm all about using, I don't want to, it's not politically correct, but it is supposed to be positive language. So Capacity sounds nicer than tolerance. But you'll see in this window of capacity, there is this safety space. So everything that happens here is in the safety, okay? And it ebbs and flows. And sometimes you're going to get excited, and sometimes you're going to get a little nervous, and sometimes you're going to blush, and sometimes you're going to want to turn your head away and not look, or you're not going to want to blink, or you're going to want to blink more. That all is normal functioning stuff that happens in the safety. But when you're in that hyper arousal up here, that's going to be when you start getting anxious. That's going to be the space you start catastrophizing. And if you don't know what that word is, you can Google it later, but catastrophizing is essentially where you go from like, oh, I parked my car down the street. I have 30 minutes to get down here, to, oh my God, they're going to tow my car away. They're going to hit me with fines. They're going to throw me in jail. They're going to like, and just all from like, you're 2 minutes late to go back to your car and pay for parking. It's going to, like, that's what your brain does. So if you have a brain that goes from like, everything's fine to disaster, that's a brain that likes to go to hyperarousal in the nervous system. Hypoarousal is more of that depression side. So it's going to be more that Eeyore, that like, oh my gosh, it's raining. I just want to take a nap. I don't want to get up right now. I just want to saunter this way. I just want to like sit here and watch movies. That's that hypoarousal. Now, when you line up the nervous system with the window of capacity, this is what it looks like. So you can kind of see that sympathetic nervous system, this hyperarousal space, okay? Again, thinking of that hyperfreeze, that deer in the headlights. Your ventral vagal nervous system is right in that window of capacity. It is completely held in that window of safety. So anytime you're in that space, you're feeling safe, you're feeling connected, you're feeling social. When you are leaning more to the hyperarousal or hypoarousal, you're heading towards, you want to be away from people, you're trying to protect, you're trying to control, you're trying to maybe fearmonger, and those are what comes up in hyperarousal and hypoarousal. Avoidance, rejection, all of that. And here's what it looks like with the survival responses, that fight, flight, hyperfreeze, the fawning, and the hypofreeze. They're not landing in the safety zone at all. They're happening up here or down here. And so fight, you can think about like that adrenaline rush you get. You're in that more sympathetic nervous system. You're ready to put your hands up. Fight, flight, I'm running, I'm going to run. My heart rate goes up, sympathetic nervous system. And then the freeze, that deer in the headlights of, oh my gosh, there's a bus coming at me, or whatever it is, that's the freeze. Fawning is going to be, I just want to get out of here, so I will say or do anything to make them happy, to appease them, to get me out of here. If I pretend this is not what's happening, then I might survive this. If I act like I like them, maybe they will go away. If I act like that would get them to leave me alone versus having ignored them, right? Hypofreeze can look like I didn't have any words. I was stuck. I couldn't even move. My brain had shut down. It fell out of my head. I don't know what happened. That's the hypofreeze. I just played dead right there, hoping it would go away. And I want to make it plain that, by the way, you can be in more than one of these at the same time. So in safety, you see this this wave right here, but you are capable of ping-ponging from hyperarousal to hypoarousal. It's a beautiful thing. It doesn't feel fun, but this is what it looks like. So you see I've added rhythm, rise, resolve, and reframe up here, and I'll get into why in just a second, but it's my theory rest. But checking out this, this is what life really feels like, is it's like, oh, I was fine, and then I panicked, and then I was fine again, and then I was like really sad, and then I was fine again, and then I had a memory and it got really sad, and then I was sort of okay and starting to like, oh, it was a sweet memory, and then, you know, life, and it goes on and on and on, right? And that's normal. It's normal. But what is rhythm, rise, resolve, and reframe? And you see I have resolve up here twice because it's obviously for the freeze response. So rhythm, when you think about your heart, you think about the pulse you're sending out in the world, the wave that you're sending out in the world, the energy that you are sending out in the world. When you look at fight and you look at flight, both of them require the heart rate to rise. And if we can tempo that down, then we give that adrenaline somewhere to go to move into this resolve, to regulate, to get back into a space of safety when we have rhythm involved. So it doesn't work to say to somebody who's having a panic attack or feeling anxiety, oh, calm down. Like that's 1000% how that doesn't work. But if I say, let's go for a walk, let's do tapping. This has been very effective for me to start doing EFT tapping. And so I do want to look at the chat in a second because I can't see it. Can you see the chat, Jimmy? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So he's got it. Cool. Fantastic. Okay. Rise. So one thing I really want to drive home before I go any further, and that is that whatever your shame responses are, whatever your trauma reactions are, whatever your emotional state is in, if it's anger, if it's laughter or happiness, if it's whatever it's in, it is not right or wrong, but it is to be honored. And that is so important because we've been taught there's good emotions and there's bad emotions, and that shame has this goodness and this badness. And the truth is it's just kind of a neutral catalyst that we use to either alchemize a thing or stay stuck. And the thing about trauma is that when you are put in a place in your life where you have to start making choices in service to survival, generally speaking, your next choice after that is further into survival, not out of it. That's what happens when you don't know how to alchemize a traumatic situation, when you don't know how to alchemize and connect with your shame, when you don't know how to alchemize and recognize that it's okay for you to be angry, or it's okay for you to be confused or overwhelmed, because those are emotions that are neutral and they're part of the human experience. And they are your catalyst to alchemizing the things. So rise, I want to rise to meet my flight response. I want to honor my flight response. I want to go somewhere. Some of us do this by taking vacations, and we leave where we live and we go find other places to see and experience. And that's our flight response from our terrible job and our boring life and our debts and all of the things, right? So we will rise to meet it and flight and get out of here and go have some rest, some resolve, right? Resolve can also, I'll go through some resolve exercises towards the end, but resolve is taking that freeze and thawing it out. And resolve usually involves a lot of, just like that exercise we did earlier. What are you seeing? What are you tasting? What are you smelling? What are you hearing? What is your emotional state? What is your physical state? And what is your soul space saying to you? So that's what resolve is going to look like. Reframe all things in compassion. So when you say to yourself, after you have fawned because someone was bullying you in a space, and you said the thing that would appease them that you know wasn't true, and it feels kind of like you betrayed yourself to do it, but you had to do it to get out of that moment. Instead of sitting there and going, I lied to them, I deserve what I get because I went with them on this, they think that I'm their friend now, I didn't protect myself, I abandoned myself in that space by saying, by doing, by agreeing, by going with whatever that looks like. I want you to pause, and I want you to start reframing that. I did not recognize before that moment, perhaps, that there was a trauma trigger in play. I did not realize in that moment that with that trauma trigger was also a shame trigger. And it happened to be my fawning shame trigger. And so I knew that the only way out of that was to go with this thing, to survive the moment. And it was not my best moment. And I want you to remember that it's just a moment. It's not your life. It might even be a series of moments that have led up to that one to get you there, usually from survival and other surviving situations. And to know that because you sit here today and you can hear this, it means that you have a 100% survival rate. And let that reframe and that compassion be what moves you forward out of that shame fawning space and into that healing alchemizing space. And then there's the other resolve for if you're having a hypo freeze response, and you're like my brain just did, trying to get the words, and you're finding yourself struggling to find the words. You find yourself feeling down, feeling just not well, like you can't move forward, like you're stuck in a rut, like you're in the same cycle. Like that's what that hypoarousal feels like, is, do I go anywhere? Do I ever grow? Do I ever really change my life? Or do I just kind of do a little and then I drop again? And if that's what's coming up for you in the space, I want to remind you that when resolving, getting present in this moment, the hyper freeze lends itself to anxiety. And it says, I'm going to worry about the future. That's what anxiety is. To resolve that, you get back in this moment with your body, with your mind, with your soul. When you find yourself in that hypoarousal, that I don't know how I'm going to get out of bed today. I don't even know why I keep going to this job. I don't even know who these people are anymore. I don't even know who I am anymore. If you find yourself in that space, you're worrying too much about what's been. And that lends itself to depression, which is being stuck in the hypoarousal space. And the way to resolve that is the same way as the other one. And that is to get present in this moment. I woke up today. I don't have to do anything I don't want to today, because I am my own sovereign being. I can brush my teeth if I want to, or I can just use the mouthwash. I can go over here and change my shoes. I can go over here and not put shoes on. And recognizing that you, in this moment in your existence, and what you're seeing and tasting and smelling and feeling in your mind and your body and your soul, you are resolving back to this reality, this moment, this space. And that is how you break out of the hypo freeze. And I want to show you that this is really, like I showed you that simple white wave earlier, and that's what your textbooks are going to show you. But let's also be honest and talk about, there is a lot of depth when you start doing soul work, and when you start connecting your soul work with your body work, and when you start connecting your body work with your mental workout. And it is a lot of depth. So just like there can be complex trauma, there can be an equally pleasant experience of healing and living in safety and living in regulation and living in your window of capacity in your ventral vagal space. Okay. And then this is the real mess of it all. It is layered. That's why you couldn't see this before. That's why you're suddenly having a lot of light bulb moments and being like, this makes so much sense. Yeah, it was always there. It was always in you, but nobody's ever pulled it apart to show you the dimensions of it. We've just sort of been like, here's this theory, good luck, and also some pills. That's kind of what we've been resolved to. And the truth is that we are complicated beings. We are flesh, we are soul or spirit, and we are brains that do amazing things, that have creativity, that have color and depth. And when all three of these systems are working, this is what the life experience actually looks like. So rhythm, rise, resolve, and refrain. And these were the initial representatives I had for it. So I don't, with rhythm, it's that you can tap, or you can, sometimes it's just like having that just reminder, that power. You have power to create a rhythm, to create a current, to create your place in the world. You have a body, you get to take up space. And you do that with responding to fight through rhythm. You have the ability to rise to meet yourself wherever you are. And you have the ability to resolve, to find where you are in this moment, in the fullness of yourself, mind, body, soul. And you have the ability to change your narrative, because whatever you're listening to and believing is shaping how you're reacting, behaving, and thinking in the world. And so if the narrative you're feeding on is one from people from your past, people from different cultural aspects, people from things that don't align with you, or things that you weren't ready for, your narrative is going to be one that's not servicing you. It's going to keep you in survival. It's not one that you've alchemized. So reframing is a way to alchemize it. So how to know if it's a restorative response? Does it come from a space of compassion, courage, and curiosity? So self-compassion is something that we don't know enough about. We really don't know how to walk that out. We're so good at pretending it, but we really don't do a good enough job with ourselves of sharing compassion. Courage. Are you operating in courage? It's not the same thing as bravery. Bravery requires you leave safety. Courage does not. Courage just says, sit in safety, sit in your power, and tell the truth. And then curiosity. Is that the truth? Is that the only truth? Is there other truth? Staying curious. Shame is a big, curiosity rather, is a huge tool in combating shame. And it helps us to remember that shame isn't the only narrative. And it's often not the most honest narrative. Curiosity is the opposite. It's very honest, and it's honest with honoring everyone's individual identity and orientation to the world. So stay curious. And if it doesn't, then it's not the answer. If it doesn't come with compassion, courage, and curiosity, it's not the answer. Keep trying. And then ask yourself, if in your trauma response, if it wasn't compassion, courage, and curiosity, was it a trauma response or was it a shame response? Did I go to denial? Did I withdraw? Did I attack others? Did I attack myself? Did I fight somebody? Did I run away? Did I freeze? Or did I fawn? And those are how you're going to know you've moved out of that space. I'm going to go into this image a little bit more later, but I want to talk about how shame and suffering from trauma is a disconnect between our being and our higher self. When we're focused on the trauma, we're not present. And when we're focused on the trauma, we're not in the alignment with ourselves. So we can't really hear ourselves, which is why a lot of trauma survivors don't trust their intuition. They're empathic beings who don't trust their own intuition, which makes for a lot of interesting life experiences. And it's because that trauma has us disconnected, and that shame has us disconnected from the fullness of ourselves, our mind, body, and soul. And to reconnect, to get in touch with, because the truth is, we're like, I don't even know who I am anymore. You may not know how to be connected to yourself. And you may feel like you've never known that. But the truth is that when that little consciousness birthed in your brain, before you had a thought, before you knew you existed, before you were able to verbalize any of that, there was the ability for compassion to know you. And it was there. And it says, hey, you deserve this. You deserve to be here. This is part of being the human experience. And so lots of self-compassion in order for you to connect with your higher self, so that you do hear and you do have a stronger intuition, and then you can alchemize when that trauma and that shame is coming up for you. Okay, so it requires compassion for the self, and then it requires compassion for others. And that's a little bit harder. Keep practicing, no shame there. To reconnect also requires courage. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you're going to do, or the most courageous thing you're going to do, is to show compassion to yourself or to others. And to do that with curiosity is just even more. It's the answer to complex trauma. And it requires that curiosity. Yes. All right. Rhythm, rise, resolve, reframe. Here's some other ways to think about it. So you're going to rise every day like the sun. You don't actually have to fly. You don't actually have to run. You don't have to do anything but get up like the sun every day. Rhythm is going to, of course, that metronome. So stay steady. Resolve. You're going to have thoughts and you're going to have to work it out. And you're going to have more thoughts and you're going to have to work it out. You're a creative being. So you're thinking and you're lighting the world with thought. And then you're going to have to work it out through your heart and decide what you're following and be present in the moment when you do. And then reframing all things in compassion. If it's condoning trauma, if it's condoning shame, if it's not serving your highest good, if it's not something you would say to the goddess self or to God or whatever your higher power is to you, if you wouldn't say it to them, then reframe it. Here's my book that I wrote that goes way more in depth into everything I showed you today, and it has all of these wonderful slides in it as well. But I am Pepper Joy, the trauma alchemist and author. And so I want to teach people how to live their best life from the inside out by taking the science of healing soul deep. So stay curious, live your best life from the inside out and stay curious. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this and stop the screen share. Yes. And I want to go into this next space, just take these last few minutes, and I want to introduce you guys to tears, because tears are very powerful for several reasons. One of those reasons is that it can tell exactly where you are in your nervous system and what you're actually feeling. I can't tell you how many times I've had a client crying in front of me and they can't figure out why. I don't know if I'm mad or if I'm sad, and I'll just sit there and watch their tears and I can tell them exactly which one it is because of where the tears fall from. And this is important because sometimes you might not know what it is you're feeling, but your tears won't lie. So I want to take us into this next space. Oops, hold on. More technical difficulties. Here we go. So I want to talk to you about tears and their meaning, because this is the most natural alchemizing tool that the universe has gifted us, is the physical ability to shed tears. Okay. And these are the different types of tears. There's a Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Okay. So the Vata tears are the tears of insecurity and overwhelm and loss of control. So when you have tears that are running down the side of your nose, there is fear and insecurity and overwhelm and loss of control happening for you. And it might come after you think you're angry. You might think, I'm angry. And then you start crying and you're like, I always cry when I'm angry. Because it might actually be fear. It might actually be overwhelm. And you feel there's this emotion of anger in there, but it's coming out as fear and insecurity and overwhelm. They fall from the innermost corner of your eye and they are bitter. And when you have those tears falling, it's time to sit down and get courageous with yourself. What am I afraid of? What is this overwhelm? What is this loss of control really? So that's how you respond to those tears, and it's how you alchemize it, because as you start releasing those tears, you start releasing chemicals from your body, from your brain, from your nervous system that are telling you there's fear in this space, there's overwhelm, there's loss of control happening. And when you sit in presence with that, in that resolved space of, I am feeling tears, they taste bitter, they come from my inner eyelid, or this is what they mean. This is where they're coming from. And it helps you get to the root of your struggle that much quicker. The next type of tear is the Pitta. These are the tears of actual anger. All right, so if they're falling from the middle of your eyes versus the inner corners, those are the ones that now you know that anger that you thought you were feeling, now you know for sure if that's what it was. Frustration, jealousy. I didn't know that people cried when they got jealous, but apparently they do. And it's with anger and it's with frustration. And these are salty tears. It's appropriate that the jealousy tear is salty. But how do you address it? You address it with curiosity. Why are you salty? Why are you angry? Why are you frustrated? Right? With that same, you take that courage and you take that curiosity, and let's boldly go figure out where this comes from and why. What is this unmet need that I have? What is this attachment cry that I am feeling and expressing right now? That's how you answer a Pitta tear and alchemize it. The last tears are the Kapha tears, and these are the ones of both joy and grief, as well as compassion. And I would encourage each of us this holiday season, as we are going through, maybe we have family in our life that we hang out with, maybe it's chosen family, maybe it's going to be a little bit more dorsal and isolated. Whatever your moments around the holidays are this year, I encourage each of us to take a moment to sit with the feelings of compassion towards ourselves, and challenge you to feel that compassion so deep you have tears about it. If you could love yourself with such depth that you shed tears of compassion, you would alchemize a lot of trauma and shame that you're struggling with. But few of us offer up that kind of self-care. Few of us are courageous enough to go there. Few of us are curious enough to figure out how. But all of us are capable of the compassion to go that deep, to find out. So tears are the water that we shed, and water is life, and tears are life that's lived. And I ask us to respond to them in compassion, courage, and curiosity. And that's another way you're going to live your best life from the inside out, using rest and also alchemizing in your life. So we came in, oh my goodness, I have a few minutes left. That's so exciting. I would like to invite anyone to go ahead and unmute if you want to. If you have any questions, if you want to pop them into the chat, I'm going to allow this last few minutes to just be, maybe you're curious about some exercises. I'll call Reverend PJ to come do an exercise. They're also making dinner because it is blessed when they do so. It is not as much when I do so. Yes, we are. And we're going to just do an exercise with them that involves mind, body, and soul and allows us to really get a felt sense of what alchemy is. So I'm going to have to unblur my background here.
No, you don't.
No? I don't know. I might. I can only handle one face at a time, I think.
But what we want to do is, first off, warm up your hands, just rub them together like I'm doing right now. And all we're doing right here is we're simply moving towards a grounded state. Perhaps some of this information was a lot for you, or whatever the case might be, and you need to be brought back into your body. That's all we're going to do, is reset your nervous system with this exercise. Now take those hands once they're warm, if you wish, and rub your stomach like I'm doing right here. Just rub your stomach with either hand. Rub it. Now take your other hand and rub your stomach.
Same direction, different direction.
Different direction, same direction, doesn't matter. Okay, now the next thing I want you to do might be the hardest thing I ask you to do. And that is, I want you to stare straight ahead, kind of stare, but just fix your gaze on something that is in front of you. And we're going to do that for 15 seconds, starting now. Don't forget to breathe. Okay. Now I want you to, without moving your head, look as far as you can to your left without moving your head. That's the hard part. As far as you can to your left, and it makes it easier to hold if you'll fix your eyes on something. And we're going to start now. We're going to hold that for 30 seconds. Doing good. Don't forget to breathe. Five more seconds. All right, let it go. Now we're going to, without moving our head again, we're going to look as far as we can to the right. Starting now. I'm going to hold that for 30 seconds. Almost there. Halfway there. Don't forget to breathe. Okay, let it go. Take a deep breath. We're going to breathe in to the count of 4 and breathe out to the count of 6 through your mouth. Starting now. Do that twice more. In through the nose to the count of 4. Out through the mouth to the count of 6. Once more. In through the nose. And out to the count of 6. Now, take your hand and rub your stomach one more time. Okay, switch hands. Right on. You should be grounded now. If you're not, hit me later.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, everyone. So getting this feeling, this sense in your body, and just sort of recognizing how you feel and checking in once again with your sensory system. What are you seeing? What are you tasting? What are you smelling? What do you feel emotionally? And just let that wash over your body and recognize that when you're sensing this, when you're feeling this sensation you have right now, just as trauma can imprint on you and show up later as a reaction, so can healing and so can regulation. And you can literally condition yourself every time you start to feel heading towards hyperarousal or hypoarousal. This right here is regulation and where you want to be. So you are welcome to ask us for about more exercises. I've got some questions coming in and different. Okay, excellent. Yes, because we also have our YouTube live. So I had some comments happening there. Feel free, by the way, to enter your email addresses in the chat box, or if you're on YouTube and you're joining us there, feel free. I would love to keep in touch with all of you. I am teaching a class in January, actually, for certified trauma specialists. And so through the International Association, as I mentioned before, I'm an instructor, and I would love to gift the world with people who are out here responding in rest in the restorative response system theory through rhythm, rise, resolve, and reframe, versus seeing trauma reactions and then getting caught up with their own trauma reactions, which seems to be the cycle of our world today. But I truly believe that if we start meeting shame and trauma with rest and with restoration, then we're really going to actually affect change in the world. And that is my goal, not just for this generation, but for everyone. And I believe it's accessible for everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I will see you in the future.